I will be briefly discussing collection, development, and self-censorship in the library. I'm going to specifically cover the importance of a collection policy, self-censorship and biases, and collection development choices. It is very important to have a collection policy in the library. I have determined 3 big reasons why a collection policy should be put in place. These reasons were taken from both the course textbook, the collection program in schools, and ALA's article about selection policy writing. First, a collection policy provides focus. The policy very clearly establishes the objective of the library programs and materials. It also outlines criteria for the collection selection process. There are countless titles available. This policy helps those responsible for collection development wade through the possibilities. Which leads me to my second reason a collection policy is important because it helps eliminate waste. This means the policy helps guide purchases made for collection development, thus potentially eliminating random selections with no thought. This policy can also help librarians weed out books that no longer fulfill selection criteria and can now make way for new materials. So to me, the first 2 reasons are no-brainers. They make sense. The final reason, to communicate, showed up in both the textbook and the EALA article, and honestly, it took me by surprise. I previously didn't think about how something like a collection policy helps with communication, but it does. A collection policy articulates the philosophy and criteria behind acquisition choices to the surrounding community. In that same vein, it serves as a rationale and procedure when complaints are made about materials viewed as questionable. So now that I have established 3 big reasons why it's important to have a collection policy, I'm now going to go over on some reflections on self-censorship. So I found an UNT-affiliated article called Silence in the Stacks, an exploration of self-censorship in high school libraries by Tudor, Moore, and Brune. So these authors conducted a collection analysis study on around 90 or so Texas public schools. And the main 3 areas of focus for this study are the possible relationships between a school's characteristics and the absence of controversial books, the extent to which the librarians are engaging in self-censorship, and the controversial topics least likely to be included in the collections. So the results from the study were both surprising and interesting. So they found that a positive relationship between the district size and the district enrollment, between the district size and the enrollment of the school and the number of controversial books was found. So basically, schools that had larger district size or larger enrollment typically had more of the challenge books in their libraries. The study also found that 63% of school libraries had the number of expected banned books based on their enrollment and district size. And then finally, the 2 controversial topics least likely to appear in collections were transgender content and LGBTQ plus content. It also noted in the article that things like drugs or gun violence were more likely to appear in collections. So this study highlighted the dangers that could happen from self-censorship. So I thought this article quoted someone else, Bellows, but I thought this was a good definition of self-censorship. So self-censorship occurs when a librarian engages in a self-preserving, self-defense mode to prevent potential conflicts and challenges with materials they consider to be controversial. The authors also make note that this can be done both consciously and subconsciously. So, some of the dangers of this is that it limits access to diverse perspectives, which alternatively also eliminates potentially constructive discussions about the topics in these challenged books. So, some really important takeaways from this article is that, like I've already mentioned, self-censorship typically isn't done purposefully or maliciously, but instead it's an act of self-preservation, whether done knowingly or not. And also, from this article, I noted how important it is to be aware of one's biases and to be mindful of these when making collection choices. So instead of just shoving your biases under the rug, we should confront them and be aware of potential self-censorship during collection development. Finally, I'm going to share my reflections on the article Children's Collection Development, Good Books or Books Kids Like. I really enjoyed this article. I thought it was interesting. So two big things I learned is that at the beginning, the ways that the author defined quality literature I thought was interesting. And I liked some of that on there. And then also the importance of finding that sweet spot of both books of quality and books that appeal to your students. So my application for that is obviously when I engage in collection development, that I'm going to look for both books with both quality and appeal, but also keep in mind that sometimes you'll have books of quality, of just quality, and sometimes you'll have books of just appeal. And this article just made me think of my journey as a classroom teacher and developing my classroom library, and how it has evolved from me reading something, loving it so much, wanting my students to enjoy it, versus really listening to the types of books that they're into. So, for example, I currently teach middle school. I came from a high school coming to middle school. So it was a process of trying to figure out what these middle school kids were into. And so it has brought me to include more graphic novels in my collection, as well as more books of horror, which I don't typically pick up a book like that, but I have a large population of students that enjoy that. So that this article is just interesting because I realized how that also affected me as a classroom teacher and developing my classroom library. These are the resources from my presentation. So like I've already mentioned, I drew from the ALA's Workbook for Selection Policy Writing, from our book, the article assigned Children's Collection Development, Good Books or Books Kids Like. And then I found the book, the article, Silence in the Stacks, an exploration of self-censorship in high school libraries. And that is all. Thank you.